today, like I said, we're going to be talking about creativity hacks, specifically about song starting. I think we've all been in that position where you're just super motivated to produce. You literally can't wait to sit down, right? But then you actually do sit down, you start that new idea, and you just struggle to get anything going, right? And for me, I know that's like a super frustrating point, because when you're starting and you lose motivation that fast, like you're basically shooting yourself in the foot early. Like you can't even get to all of the exciting stuff, right? Like, or at least what I would call some of the exciting stuff, like mixing and mastering and layering and sound design and all that fun stuff. But, you know, I would stress that this problem of starting music being a problem, it's common. It's pretty damn common. I think it happens to every artist. So whether you are a bedroom producer or just a legitimate professional doing this, you know, for a living, you're gonna come across this. It's going to happen. But I think the biggest difference between the professionals out there versus maybe the more bedroom type producers is that professionals figure out a way to kind of fight through this, right? They have like legitimate tactics in place to kind of combat, those issues that they face in terms of starting songs and starting ideas. So that's what we're going to be talking about and demonstrating today. It's just a few of those like types of techniques that I think I use and definitely Zach uses, and I'll talk about Zach in a minute, but it'll help you kind of tap into that creative zone that you can get into early, or that flow state, you know, that artistic self, whatever you want to call it. Those are the techniques that we're going to try to get you to as fast as possible. Quick rundown of today's format. So I just like to be very transparent about what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be doing, so you know exactly what's kind of coming in front of us right now. I'm basically going to do just a few quick intros. We'll have Zach demonstrate some song starting techniques for about a half an hour, might be a little more than a half an hour. And then from there, we'll do a giveaway. I'll be giving away a free download, or I guess free access, since it's a streaming-based platform, but free access to the start to finish course that I did of a Laid Back Luke track. So the URL is right here. Right? It's hyperbitsmusic.com/start to finish if you want to check it out. But really briefly, it's just a 6-hour course that I did remixing a track of Laid Back Luke's. It got signed to Mix Mass Records. It's unedited, but it's kind of like a course that allows you to be almost like a fly on the wall behind my shoulder as I create a remix in under 6 hours. So we'll be giving away, access to that towards the end of this workshop. So definitely stick around for that. It also includes a course about Serum, a platinum level course about Serum. So all in, it's like $147 value. And then finally, after that, we'll do 30 minutes of a just straight up Q&A. We'll probably go longer, to be entirely honest. We like to hang and answer questions. So at the end, we'll completely open this up. We'll talk, we'll try to cater a few questions for sure about song starting, but for the most part, we will, completely open it up. So let me know. I mean, I can't see your chat while I'm in these slides, but I'll jump over real quick. Just let me know if you're with me and if you guys are ready to get this going. Just let me give me a yes or something in the chat. All right, nice. A lot of yeses and a lot of 1, 2, 3 jumps. Nice. Okay, cool. So super quick. Just going to introduce myself. There's always a few people on these calls who are a bit impatient and want to get to the juicy stuff, and I don't blame you guys, but I do think it's super important that you just know who I am, who Zach is, just to like shed some light on where all this information is coming from, and really, to let you guys know that you're in good hands. We've been doing this for a while now. It's definitely our passion, and it's what we love to do. So I think it's just kind of important to give you a little heads up. But basically, for anyone not familiar with my work, my name is Sarek. I produce under the name Hyperbits. And I also had a side project called the Rooftop Boys for a bit. Like I said before, if anyone signed on early, just moved to beautiful San Diego from Brooklyn, was living in Brooklyn and Manhattan for like 6 or 7 years before that. And between these two kind of artist projects, I've done official remixes for Beyonce, Tuvlo, Nick Jonas, Laid Back Luke, a bunch of other artists. I've signed a ton of originals and remixes to labels like Universal, Sony, Island Records, I'm not going to list all of them to save a little time. And across SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, I've had about 13 million streams of my music, which I think is a pretty considerable chunk. It's not, it's not crazy, but it's definitely a shitload of streams. I also spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of my time teaching music production. That's definitely kind of where my focus is going. I started this online school called the Hyperbits Master Class. And between all of those things, right, being an artist, teaching, doing some engineering work, so in one way or another, I've been a part of over 15 Hype Machine #1 records. And real quick, Zach, so Zach was originally a student of the master class, but he is now a co-instructor, and he's doing a lot of dope stuff under the alias Science. So he's one half, he's the producer and one half behind the Science project. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold here, but he's done official remixes for Tuvlo, John Newman, Autograph, Steve Void, Steve James, a bunch of others. He's done some work with record labels like Universal and Sony. He's licensed his music to like some mega brands, like MTV, Toyota. He's, like I said, he's a masterclass co-instructor, and he's in charge or tasked with being in charge of keeping our content super up to date. So literally the moment something happens in the music production industry, if it's not in our class, I consider it, outdated or that we've fallen behind. So he's kind of on top of keeping everything super up to date. He's also our Ableton expert, which is awesome because, as a lot of you guys know, I produce in Logic, and so he's kind of the Ableton expert there. So we're going to get going here. Basically, like I said, we're going to be talking about song starting. Again, it's a pretty big issue, right? Facing a blank DAW just kind of sucks. Like, personally, I think it's been a pretty big pain point for me. It took a while for me to get comfortable with that feeling of like, shit, there's nothing in front of me and I have to get a whole song out of that. It's taken me a bunch of years to really become comfortable with that. But, it's something that you can definitely not necessarily perfect, but it's something that you can get a lot better at, and something that you can, for the most part, kind of approach or attack with confidence and just kind of figure out a way to be comfortable with that feeling of facing an empty song. So again, last time I'm going to do this real quick. Let me know if you're kind of with me. Just give me a yes in the chat, and then we can kind of get going with everything that Zach is going to be showcasing. All right. A lot of woos, a lot of ready spaghettis. I don't think I've ever heard that. I feel like I should have, though. So, okay. Zach is going to be talking about 3 song starting strategies today. There's obviously tons and tons of song starting strategies. When I asked him to list his favorites, I think he gave me at least 10 or 12. So we kind of narrowed it down to some of the 3 that I thought would be really cool to just showcase today. Originally, Zach was going to do these demonstrations completely live, just right on this call. But when we were testing the audio stuff this morning, we were just running into some issues with the recording basically not being super high quality if we did it live. So long story short, I just made him record what he was going to do live today. He just recorded it this morning. So I'm just going to play the video of basically, what this whole call is about. So it's going to run for about half an hour. I might be pausing it at times to talk out a few points or to maybe stress a few things that I'm noticing. But for the most part, I'm just going to jump over to this video and press play, and we'll just basically treat it as if Zach is actually live. Plus, Zach is here, so he'll be jumping in as well. So maybe, Zach, real quick, you want to just say hi? And
yeah, what up, guys? Yeah, this will just be way better because just with CPU and stuff, it was really it was hitting my system hard. So Sarek will be pausing it every once in a while, and we'll talk throughout it.
Awesome. All right, sounds good. So I'm going to go over here and just press play, and we'll take a listen.
All right, so we're first going to talk about starting a song from scratch using sound design. I love using sound design to start songs, especially if I'm not feeling that creative as far as composing, and I just kind of want to get into a synth and really just mess around with parameters and come up with something interesting and unique. And, starting with sound design can be a great way to open up the door compositionally, because you might start making one sound and you'll have ideas for something else, or, things just start to kind of happen when you spend a bunch of time with sound design and getting to know a synth really well. So we're going to be using Serum for this example. Serum is probably my favorite synth out there right now, mainly just because I know it so well, and there's so many ways you can manipulate and create a unique sound at a really high quality level. So before we jump right in and start designing a sound, I want to first grab a chord progression, because ultimately, usually when I start a song from sound design, I'm going to start with a chord progression and kind of like a pad sound or a harmonic sound that really just can lay the foundation for the song itself. So I'm always saving MIDI ideas. Definitely encourage you guys to do this, or have a bunch of MIDI packs available. That way, when you're not feeling very, inspired compositionally, you can just go grab a chord progression and start with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab an idea I've saved in the past. I like this chord progression. And what we'll do is I'm just going to simplify this down so that it's literally just like a 4-chord chord progression. And that way we can focus the sound design on that. So let me just go ahead and delete some of these notes. And then I'll go ahead and make these extended all the way so that they're just 4 chords. And this is so we'll go ahead and throw this down too, so that way it's kind of full. Now let's hear what we have just with the saw in Serum. Maybe bring this up. Cool. So, just a real basic chord progression. You would do this some other time when you're starting your sound design. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Serum, and the first thing I always do when I start from sound design is I'm going to find a cool wavetable. And that's what's so dope about Serum, is there's just so many wavetables available. I've saved a ton in my lifetime, but I've lately been getting really into these Echo Soundworks emulations of real instruments. So we'll just kind of play through some of these until we find one that we like. Okay, so I kind of like this wavetable. It's based off of a Rhodes. So the first thing I usually do when I'm kind of working on a chord sound is I'm going to modulate the wavetable position in an interesting way, because that just creates some nice movement in the sound right off the get-go. So I'm just going to grab an LFO here. And, we go over lots of cool sound design techniques and explain Serum actually completely in depth in our masterclass, but I'm just going to go through kind of one technique right now to show you, but there's so many different ways you can start with different types of sounds. But for chords, generally, I like to kind of start with a nice wavetable and manipulate the wavetable position. Maybe I'll try one of these warp modes to kind of create even more interesting tone with this wavetable. And then I'm going to add some unison so that this becomes a little more stereo and just kind of a more detuned sound to it. So once you kind of have one layer, the next thing you can do really easily is just add in another nice layer to fatten up the sound. And then what I'm actually going to do is I already kind of like the idea of having like a warm saw base layer. I'm just going to filter out the high end though so that it still kind of feels pad-like, because ultimately right now I'm sort of designing a pad. Okay, and now I'm just gonna kind of filter out the high end a little bit so it's a little more pad-like. And, you know, from there, you've already got a really cool, unique pad sound to start with. So, you know, we could do some real simple things to kind of make it a little more fully finished sounding. Like we could add some reverb to this. And, you know, and then from there, you've already got this nice harmonic structure to start a song from. So from here, I could just go try to find maybe a drum loop to kind of start the percussion section of the track. Go ahead and put this at. And, you know, I'm really just kind of feeling it out now that I have sort of a percussive idea and a harmonic idea, and I'm just kind of going with my gut and just developing this. And it's really easy to just keep developing the idea once you have a nice, you know, sound that you've started from the beginning. And, you know, you could keep going and you could see how this would just keep developing and you'd keep adding sounds. And, you know, maybe I could add in a bass line that is the root note of every one of these chords in a cool, like, rhythmic way. And, you know, it's just like that. We just took a basic MIDI that we didn't spend any time creating the composition for, and we really just focused on making the sound first and getting something kind of interesting. And, you know, don't be afraid from here to layer that up, right? Like you can really easily with Serum just duplicate this layer, and now I could focus on this layer, right? And I could just come in and I could change up the wavetables. And, you know, maybe since I did a saw wave in the previous example, maybe now I'll do a square wave, just so we're not overlapping the exact same type of sound. And when you bring this back in with this guy, And then maybe even for this layer, we can add some cool movement using maybe like a tremolator. And, you know, from there, you can just see how quickly having an awesome sound to start with and just doubling stuff up, changing stuff, tweaking stuff, adding can really lead to an interesting start for a song.
So real quick, I'm just going to interject here because first off, that was really sick. But I think there's one thing that Zach kind of like, I mean, if I could add to or stress something here, it's that sound design can literally kind of help dictate, right? Like where your song is actually going. And that's a really important concept because you don't always have to have an idea in your head, right? Or a sound in your head that you're trying to recreate or replicate or whatever. Like a lot of times for me, I feel like production can be a lot about just like letting go, right? Like literally letting the sounds that you discover and play around with, right? Like let those sounds create or even kind of dictate or even influence, right? Like influence where you're going compositionally. I know that took me, it sounds like such a simple concept, but that personally for me, because I'm like a little bit of a control freak and like a type A type person, that took me a really, really long time to kind of come to terms with. But I promise you, it makes a huge difference. I mean, it did for me, basically like making me a bit more adaptable and like malleable, right? A little bit more loose when composing and creating ideas and not being all like, I don't know, uptight and just creating like something super, super specific that you have in your head. I don't know if Zach, if you want to add anything else other than that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. And I would just add like the main thing I could say is get to know a synth so well that you can just fly through it as quickly as possible and like don't let your creativity get hung up on, you know, like what do I do to if you have an idea in your head, you just need to be able to like instantly put it on the page. And I mean, I've been using Serum since the day it came out, so I feel really comfortable in that synth, but you don't have to use that synth. You can use tons of other stuff. But yeah, that would be like one thing I'd add to what you said, but I agree 100% with what you just said.
All right, cool. I'm going to hit play on this video and we'll go to the second part.
A great way to start a track from a blank DAW is by using your mood. Now, we talk a lot in our masterclass about how you can capitalize on your moods and feelings when you're writing and composing. And one great way to do that is to simply just think about the mood that you're in, or maybe a mood that you were in the other day that was really strong and powerful, whether it's a positive mood or a negative mood or kind of like a happy mood, sleepy mood, whatever, and really just sort of focus on creatively and very consciously thinking about what sounds and what types of, you know, melodies and harmonies and stuff like that really suit that mood. And if you really critically think about that and just really focus on only gravitating towards things that satisfy that mood, your whole piece collectively can turn out to be a lot more emotional and a lot more just kind of advanced sounding, because everything feels like it's working together to, you know, really showcase a specific point or whatever that mood is. So we're going to start trying this with a mood that I was in this morning, which was really kind of tired and sleepy. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and I was almost kind of like dreamy and you know, I didn't really feel fully awake. So I'm going to kind of roll with that. And the first thing I think of when I think about like sleepiness and tired and dreams is like an ARP. So I think the first thing I'm going to try to do now is create just a really airy ARP sound. Now, I love using Omnisphere for any sort of pluck sound. They just have really great sounds in here in stock. And what I'll do is I'm just going to kind of find a sound that I think will work for the most part right now, and we'll focus on composing with this mood and then just kind of see where that takes us. So I'm going to just roll through some presets until I find one that I like. Okay, this one's pretty cool. I like this sound a lot. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of go to the piano and just sort of jam out and find a chord that I feel like represents that sleepy kind of dreamy mood. And I'm just going to arpeggiate in an interesting way through it. So I'm going to kind of go try that out real quick, and then we'll go ahead and write down the MIDI once I figure that out. So I kind of like this, this little arp here, this pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and record that in. And then what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and see if we can make this a little more interesting. And I'm just kind of quantizing it a little bit. That way we can kind of make sure that it feels ARP-like and not out of time. And, you know, from here, I'm already starting to think of cool ideas of other instruments I could be adding to this to kind of really fill it up and make it feel more like kind of the breakdown of a song or the intro of a song. I'm actually going to go ahead and add kind of like a spacious reverb too, because I find that kind of adds to the dreamlike environment too. Just do like a chamber. So the first thing I'm going to add here is I'm going to go with a bass. And I think for a bass, I'm kind of feeling like sort of a Reese bass, kind of with just a lot of low end, not a lot of high end. I think that would sound really cool accompanying this ARP. And it still kind of gets that vibe of like dreamy, the dreamy mood. Have a couple cool Reese bass presets that we can work with. May actually go ahead and duplicate this out so I can record something cool. So, you know, just sort of jamming out there. Don't really like some of this, but even if we just take kind of this part, which I think was pretty cool, you could see where we could take this. Now, maybe I'll sort of fatten up this sound a little bit with maybe some saturation just to kind of make the bass. And then, you know, now we can start thinking about other elements. So, you know, if I'm feeling kind of sleepy and this is sort of like the intro thing, maybe we have like a snap or something like that, like something to keep the rhythm. And I often find that like kind of really reverbed out snaps can sound very like, you know, spacey, dreamy sort of. And I'm gonna go ahead and use a convolution reverb on these snaps just to kind of give them a really cool space that they feel like they're in. Just go with let's try a spring. And, you can just keep messing around. And from there, you've already got this sort of mood, and everything you gravitate towards and every sound you pick, you just have to be constantly thinking like, does this achieve that mood? Does it make me feel that same way? Am I adding something that's taking me away from that feeling? And I really feel like this is just a great way in general to compose, but specifically with starting a song, if you can just focus on that mood. And it's even better if you're in the mood, right? Like if you're physically feeling tired, or you're feeling angry, or you're feeling sad, or all those things, that can be a great time to go compose. And you'll be surprised how quickly you'll just be able to come up with interesting ideas, and how everything will just sort of lead somewhere. And I really encourage you guys to focus on your moods, and this can be a great way to start a song.
All right. So I just want to add a few thoughts to that. So first off, I feel like Zach definitely achieved that, like, I don't know, it sounded like a very half awake, sleepy, like ominous vibe. Which is dope. I'm still sometimes just blown away how easy music can, like, I guess, capture a certain feeling or a certain vibe. And then being able to run with that is awesome. But one thing that I wanted to point out was just how, like, organized Zach is, with his, like, sample packs and his, like, knowing the synths that he's using. We could probably do an entirely separate workshop just about staying organized using favorites folders, both for samples and patches. But I think that can really help you get, like, ideas going super fast, because when you're in those beginning stages, I feel like if, for example, like, let's just say Zach didn't have like a folder organized of, like, snaps, and he was then looking through 4 different sample packs, or scrolling through, like, trying to find, like, one snap that he would be, like, somewhat content with. It takes you out of that creative zone, that creative state. And, like, there's nothing more, I guess, frustrating, right? When you're feeling something, feeling a vibe, and then you almost have to hit the pause button on what you're doing because your own sounds aren't organized. So even though it's a little bit of a, I guess, it's not unrelated, but it's a roundabout way to getting faster and better at creating initial ideas, right? But staying organized, creating the favorites folder, basically every time you finish a song, taking, like, I don't know, your 3 or 4 favorite sounds out of that song, putting it into a place that you always know you can reference and get to, speeds up your workflow, speeds up your ability to create kind of unique ideas faster. Just something super, super worth looking into. And if you haven't done that yet, if you haven't created your own favorites folder, that'd be like the number one first action item that I would recommend any producer who's even somewhat remotely serious about what they're doing, get going on that. I don't know, Zach, anything else you want to add before we keep going?
Yeah, there was some talk. I mean, I agree with that 100%. Like, favorite, not necessarily. I don't really keep a huge favorites folder per se. I just go through sample packs and delete stuff that I don't like. So, and I kind of do that every time I get a new sample pack, which people are talking about being daunting if you haven't started. So, I would definitely recommend, like, getting rid of crap you don't think you'd ever use. But people were talking in the chat earlier about strategies for velocities of notes, and I just wanted to touch on that real quick. For me, I'm just more into sounds that sound like a human made them. So I try to play everything in, even if I'm really bad on timing, and don't adjust the velocities too much, as long as it sounds good when I play it. But if I am going to adjust, it's not like a really simple answer. It would just be every sound you use has different, well, a lot of sounds you use have different mappings on the velocity. So you always want to make sure you hear, like, what does it sound like when it's quiet? What does it sound like when it's loud? And you just kind of want to massage it to what you like. I mean, there's no one answer of exactly, oh, I always make my lower notes louder on chords or whatever. It's kind of just whatever sounds good to your ear, you should go roll with. And just remember to always check, because especially a synth like Serum, it's really easy for you to make a Serum patch like velocity sensitive, and you can get a lot more dynamics and a lot more emotion out of a pad or a piano type sound if you actually turn on velocity. And we talk about that a lot also in like the sound design section of our masterclass. But like just little things like that can really help add some human flair to a digital sound.
Yeah, and you can also, there's some techniques like in Logic you can literally humanize MIDI, which can be a combination of literally changing the length of the note as well as the velocity of the note to kind of make things sound a bit more organic, or just not as programmed in digital. So that's just, I guess, 2 or 3 little strategies between what Zach said and what I just said that can kind of get your velocities doing what you want them to do. But I think like it's worth noting what Zach said, like always experiment with like what the lower or higher velocities do to your sound, because sometimes it's like really, really drastically different. So much so that like it almost sounds like a different sound entirely. So
also, like aftertouch, a lot of people don't even know what that is, but a lot of synths have programmed in something called aftertouch, and it's when you push down on certain MIDI controllers really hard, it has like a whole different modulation or something that happens. So I've found that a lot of presets for synths have really cool aftertouch effects, just for so you guys to know about.
Sick. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, cool. Let's go to the third technique here. I think this one is off of using an image, right, as inspiration. So let's keep going here.
So for the last method I'm going to show you guys is talking about starting a song from scratch using an image. I love using imagery and artwork when I'm writing, simply because it just invokes so much emotion in myself personally. I have a lot of family that are artists, and just being able to see an image and see all the work that's gone into telling a story, I think is really effective at helping you tell a story with your songwriting. So a great way to do this is just, Googling stuff or YouTubing stuff and finding images. I like to use Pinterest and kind of all the types of things I like. I just go through Pinterest every day, and when I find cool images, I save them. So one cool image I found the other day that I wanted to try to start a song from is this image. And it's kind of just a girl falling from what looks like kind of like outside light into the water, and then a city down below. And the way you can kind of really hyper analyze images in an effective way to help with songwriting is kind of what we're going to show you. So basically what I like to do is I look at an image and I try to, at minimum, come up with sort of 4 characteristics of that image that really would help me define a song. So for this image, for instance, there's kind of the lightness above that's sort of like, euphoric and sort of almost like heavenly like. That's kind of like what this is like. And so something that's kind of like cosmic and happy for that part of the picture. And then obviously there's like this underwater world that doesn't look like scary because it's, something familiar like a city, but it's definitely darker and more kind of, a little bit more depressing than what it looks like out here. So that's kind of like the 2 moods. And then you've got this girl who's obviously falling through water. So like water is kind of a theme of this. And she's like falling, right? And she's like floating down, and that can kind of represent sort of like the pace of the track, like sort of like I would kind of assume like if you're falling, it's sort of like picking up speed, and you're kind of just like you're leaving the light and going more down into the familiar but more dark area. So using those 4 concepts, so light, dark, kind of more somber but still familiar, water, and then falling, from there you kind of have 4 directions you can take the music. So what I like to do is try to tackle each one of those directions with an element of the track, right? Because for most songs, you've got usually about 4 things playing at once, maybe 5. But you can kind of see how you can really break down an image into categories like that and then use that in the songwriting process. So the first thing I'll try to tackle is kind of like this light sort of cosmic, heavenly sort of vibe. And I think that just screams to me like a really nice chord progression and a nice, cool, euphoric sound. So I'm just going to go find some presets that I know will kind of sound like this. I've got this preset pack called Supernova that has some really cool pad sounds. So I think I'll just kind of find one, and kind of like a choiry one would sort of be what I'm looking for. Let's try. Okay, I kind of like this sound. Let me just take down this reverb so it's not as crazy long. Cool. So I think I'm just gonna sort of jam out a chord progression that I feel like kind of fits the vibe of sort of like heavenly like this. And then, I'm just going to come in here and clean this up a bit. We're not trying to go too crazy right off the get-go, because we want to, make sure that we have room to do interesting stuff with all the other instruments. So I'm just going to do this simple 4-chord progression here. And I'm going to go ahead and double the root notes just so we know the what our chords are from when we add bass. I believe it was actually this one, or is this middle one? And I kind of already like that vibe to represent sort of this light part. Now let's go ahead and try to get sort of like this act of her falling. Kind of maybe I'm thinking percussion would kind of represent like sort of the falling, fleeting feeling. And there's actually a couple more cool sort of presets that I can just use the root notes here to create this. That's really like, that's perfect. Like that's kind of like the vibe I was thinking, like sort of like running, falling, like a fleeting feeling. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to find like an ambient layer that kind of represents the water, because I feel like that's sort of a very apparent part of this image, is this kind of water splashy feeling. And I think that would sound really cool as sort of like an ambient layer. So I'm just going to search in my sample library for some water, see what I can find. I'm going to actually go ahead and make this water sample like really wide. That way it kind of just feels really euphoric and huge. And I'm also just going to throw on giant reverb for that too, so that it just kind of really is just filling up the space in the mix. And then to kind of represent this sort of like city, like familiar dark, I think I'm going to do kind of like a vocally like chant, like something that kind of just is keeping the rhythm as well, because this is sort of feeling more like rhythmic, and just something that kind of feels familiar but is still kind of like dark sounding. So let me go ahead and do that while this is just kind of playing so I can hear it. And I think I'm going to use Exhale by Output, which is, you can use it in a Contact player. And basically, it's just a vocal synth that has a lot of really cool vocal samples that you can use. And I love just kind of going through and searching for little vocal chop sounds. And I find that, you know, it's really easy and quick to get them. And you can actually search by key. So you can actually put this into the key that you're in. And I'm working right now in D flat minor, I believe. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this D flat, which is C sharp. So now whenever I play a note, it's already tuned. And so I'm just going to go kind of find a random one. That's kind of cool, like kind of running sounding to accompany the... So I'm just going to go ahead and record this. And, you know, just literally jamming out randomly on the keyboard, and you get some pretty cool sounds with Exhale. So after all that, you know, you can have this be playing and be looking at your image. And I've already kind of broke this down into the different sections. I've got the kind of nice euphoric chord progression representing the light and like kind of this cosmic thing. I've got the water sample kind of taking over the fact that we're, you know, in water here. Got this percussive like movement because she's kind of falling, and it's sort of somber because she's like leaving the light. But then, you know, you've got this city, which I guess I'm representing with the vocals. But, you know, you could see how just when you're stuck and when you want to start something from scratch, taking an image, breaking it down into parts, it just gives you ideas of things to do and places to take it. And, you know, so from there, this, you know, you could totally see this developing out into a track. And there are so many more methods that we talk about and teach in our masterclass, but these three are just really beneficial ones that can really take your song creation process and make it a lot easier and just give you a place to go when you're struggling with an empty DAW and you just kind of want to see what you're capable of without having to really try too hard. These are just sort of really nice methods that just get you in the zone really quickly and really effectively.